Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. One of the most fascinating storylines that we saw play out across the sport of college football was the November turnaround for Mario Cristobal and the Miami Hurricanes. Let me take the Miami fans back to November 1st when this team went on the road against SMU, lost in overtime. We got up here immediately and broke down what we just saw in the exact words that I said, and many Miami fans echoed in the comment section was, here we go again. Like Mario Cristobal in Miami just falling apart in the month of November. We saw the same thing happen last year in 2024. That's all we could think about. And look, that stigma was real because that's kind of been the narrative around Miami is that they would start hot. They would look like a dangerous team, but they wouldn't look like the same team in November. Super impressive what Mario Cristobal and this program did. From that game on the road against SMU, they have looked like one of the best teams in the sport. And what I want to do today is dive into what changed. Who are some of the players and what did we see schematically that allowed Miami get back to their best version? Because I think one of the cool parts about Miami going into the playoffs is, look, they have the most difficult schedule of anybody, or I should say pathway of anybody to go win a national championship. I mean, if they go out and win a national championship, we're about to witness the most impressive 4-game stretch that we've seen in the sport. You go on the road to Texas A&M, and then you play an undefeated regular season defending national champs Ohio State, and then you probably have to play the SEC champ in Georgia, and then you play the number one team in the country in Indiana. Those 4 games, you go and run the gauntlet, win all 4 of those games. It'd be the most impressive 4-game stretch that we've seen in the history of the sport. I feel really comfortable saying that right now. The cool part is the Miami's capable of doing it. And I'm not going to get up here and pick Miami to do that because I got to see them play their best football for 4 straight games. But I'll say this, there are not a lot of teams that are in this bracket that I look at and say, I don't think there are a lot of teams that have the capability of doing it. Miami does. There are certain parts of the makeup of this football team, specifically what they've become along the lines of scrimmage, that going to give them a chance. Now, what has changed? Who are the factors that are allowing Miami to get back to this version? That's what I want to get into. Before we do, and as always, the Miami fans, appreciate you guys. I'm really fired up about this one because we get to talk about the different versions of this football team that we've seen throughout 2025. We get to do some deep cuts into some players that I think have been real studs for Miami throughout 2025, especially in the month of November. I'm going to say this. If I'm leaving somebody out, if I'm leaving a reason out, let it fly in the comment section. Appreciate you guys rocking with it, man. The Miami fans been rocking with the boys for a very long time. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, here's one of the driving factors, man. Carson Beck has been one of the best quarterbacks in the sport the last 4 games. And we're talking about damn near an 80% completion percentage, 11 touchdowns to 0 interceptions, countless big-time throws. If you get this version of Carson Beck for the next 4 games in the college football playoffs, this is how I'll frame it. There are not many quarterbacks I'm taking over Carson Beck the way I've seen this kid play the last 4 games. Like, you probably take Fernando Mendoza over him. You might take Julian Sain over him, although we did not see Julian Sain play a very good game against Indiana last weekend. You got one of the best quarterbacks in this playoff bracket, and you got a quarterback that's been here and has done that. One of the biggest reasons I like Carson Beck, and I'll say this until the season's over, Miami brought Carson Beck into this program. They're paying him the money they're paying him, not only because we all think he's a really good quarterback. He's been in these moments. Miami brought him in specifically to say, hey, you played in a lot of big games at Georgia the last couple of years. You won a lot, and you won a lot of those big games. We want that experience within our program in 2025. You got a quarterback that you think can manage some of the environments and some of the moments that we're about to see over the next couple of weeks. There was a strict change in terms of what Shannon Dawson did with this offense. And number one, it was a little bit more creative For the lack of a better terms, you let the offense off the leash. And I think the best thing that happened for Miami was this narrative that Miami has to pass the eyeball test. Miami can not only just go undefeated their last 4 games, they had to go undefeated and dominate. They had to send a message to the college football playoff committee because of that. Like, winning wasn't good enough. Shannon Dawson said, all right, well, we're going to be really damn aggressive. The offense in October, specifically in the games against SMU and against Louisville, the games that they lost, it felt stale. Right? It felt conservative and it felt stale. That narrative switched. And I think Shannon Dawson was like, hey, and I don't know if Mario Cristobal sat Shannon Dawson down and said, hey, you got to start scoring some more points because it's not going to be good enough just to win. I don't know what it was. There's a stark change in terms of the creativity in the aggression that you saw from the offense. Using Malachi Toney in all sorts of different ways. I believe Malachi Toney in the last 4 games, this is going to be the last 2 games. 31 targets. 31 targets in 2 games for a true freshman wide receiver is an incredible number. 25 catches. He had 8 carries. He had 3 pass attempts. Just like, hey, we got one of the best players in the sport, and I think that's a fair assessment to make about Malachi Toney. Not only is he one of the best players in the sport, he can provide a lot of different skill sets and a lot of different value to this offense. We're going to start using him that way. That was one of the parts. Elijah Lofton. How about Elijah Lofton at tight end? We felt like there was a little bit meat left on the bone in terms of how we could use these tight ends. Elijah Lofton last 3 games, 3 straight games with touchdown passes caught. Again, Elijah Lofton is not going to be the focal point of the offense because you have a guy like Malachi Toney. You can still use Elijah Lofton in a lot of creative ways. I think Keelan Marion has been especially in the absence of CJ Daniels, been a real difference maker for this Miami Hurricanes passing attack. You've seen some good things from JoJo Trader. You still want to see it a little bit more consistent. You've seen some good things from JoJo. And then Gerard Pringle, the true freshman. We were really concerned about this rushing attack and the lack of ability to be explosive. We talked about it all season long. Miami's in the bottom of the country in terms of 15-plus yard carries. We just can't be explosive. Well, you inject Gerard Pringle, and he's averaging damn near 7 yards per carry the last 4 games. He is giving you that explosive nature in the run game that Miami desperately needed. But I'll say this, been pleasantly surprised with how physical he has ran to. Funny how when you simplify the offense a little bit and you say, hey, we got a 6-year senior quarterback that we know is a good quarterback. We're going to let him rip the ball around and we're going to make sure the ball gets to our best players. Sports sometimes ain't all that complicated, man. Get the football to your best players, especially when you have a guy like Malachi Toney. Normally things will work out. Here's another thing that I will say that gives me some optimism about Miami. Normally when teams make the college football playoffs, the teams that aren't real contenders, they just get overwhelmed along the lines of scrimmage. You got to go on the road and try to block a Texas A&M edge rusher by the name of Cassius Howell. This is one of the few football teams that I think have the tackles, that have the offensive linemen to deal with the best of the best in the pass rush. You can't say that for a lot of other teams across the sport. You can say that about Miami, and you look at the path that Miami has to go through on the road blocking Cassius Howell, and then going to and playing Ohio State neutral field against, guys that just straight up NFL draft picks along that defensive line. Then you probably have to play Georgia. You have to have an offensive line that can keep your guys clean. I think Miami has that. Now, how about the defense side of the football? Now, the defense been just really damn good. I in my opinion, the Broyles Award should probably go to Corey Heatherman. And not only because it's one of the best defenses that we see in the country, but more importantly, where this defense was last year and where it is now. It's one of the best defenses in the country. Now, what changed with the defense? I want to start with just a few shout-outs. Justin Scott being most notable. Ahmad Moten was banged up at times over the last couple of games, and then David Blay was banged up at times over the last 4 games. Justin Scott had no choice but to play a lot of football. We needed him. Justin Scott over the last 4 games, 13 stops, 7 quarterback hurries. He's been one of the better interior defensive linemen that we've seen in the country in the month of November. What happens if you get David Blay back, Justin Scott, and Ahmad Moden? I mean, we talk all this, and rightfully so, about the edge rusher duo that Miami has, and Ruben Bain and Akeem Mezdor, which is by far the best in the country. I look at that trio in the middle of that defensive line and say that there are not many interior defensive line trios that I'm taking over Miami either. And that kind of, I want to talk about Damari Brown too, but it kind of lends to this conversation too. Like, Miami got home in the pass rush in the month of November. I went back and looked at the numbers. Now, what I mean by that is, look, this pass rush has been really dominant throughout 2025. There's a reason Ruben Bain's going to be the number 1 edge rusher off the board, and there's a reason Akeem Mezdor is going to be the number 2 edge rusher off the board. They've been really good all year. There were times in the month of October, specifically in those losses, where, look, we're getting pressure on the quarterback. But in those 2 games, you only had 3 sacks, 11 TFLs, which is pretty damn good for a lot of teams across the country. It's kind of below the standard for Miami. What I mean by that is, let's look at the last 4 games. 17 sacks, 31 tackles for loss. It's one thing to be disruptive. It's another thing to get home and actually create those negative plays and kill drives off. Miami's done that the last 4 games. We need that to continue as you roll into the playoffs, because I look at Marcel Reed and say, hey, it's one thing to get pressure on him. It's another thing to get him to the ground and create those sacks and create those negative plays. Got to do that on the road against Texas A&M. Now I want to go back to my guy. Damari Brown started the last 4 games, right? OJ Frederick's been banged up. Damari Brown's been freaking awesome. I mean, this is you talk about another thing you need if you want to make a run in the college football playoffs. You look at the wide receivers you're going to have to cover. Like Casey Concepcion and Mario Craver, what I think is one of the better wide receiver duos in the country that you'll see in College Station. Then if you get through that game, you got to go cover Jeremiah Smith, and you got to go cover Carnell Tate. We need these defensive backs to be playing their best football. And I think Damari Brown has been that the last couple of weeks. There's been a lot of different players. Go back to September against Notre Dame. It wasn't perfect, but it was not. That was a team that we knew was good. We hadn't seen that version of Miami in the month of October. You got back to that version in November. And now here's the question is, can we get this version of Miami, the version of Miami we've seen in the month of November after that SMU game? Do you got 4 more games in there? You can't afford to not play your best football the next 4 weeks, or else you will not win. That's just that's the story of the playoffs, specifically the story of Miami's path. Playing some of the best teams in the country. If you play your best football for 4 straight games, you got a chance in every single game you play. Again, you can't say that for a lot of other teams that are in the playoffs. You know, it's like JMU, Tulane. Like they can play their best football. It ain't going to be enough, right? You look at Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma's a really good team, but there's some flaws. It's hard. Even if Oklahoma plays their best football, I'm not sure if they can run that gauntlet because they just can't score enough on offense. Miami has that capability. That's what excites me the most. We'll pause it there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. It's been cool to see this team look really good and then look not so good and then look really damn good again. And that's the story. That's why Miami got in. They forced that committee to say, you can't leave this team out. Now they're going to get a chance. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.